Okay, today we're going to learn how to actually write a formal proof to prove two triangles are congruent. Please make sure that you take out a piece of loose leaf paper if you choose not to print this out. However, I would suggest printing out at least the last second half of this because there are pictures that will make it easier for you to see if you can mark up the pictures as I'm going along. So the first thing, it says, can these triangles be proven congruent, and if so, by which method? If I look at the picture, I have a side, an angle, and a side marked. And on the second picture, I also have a side, an angle, and a side marked. So that is side, angle, side. Now we want to match up the corresponding parts, meaning if I cut these pictures out, what would line up with what? Angle B, in this case, would line up with angle E, right here and right here. Angle C would line up with angle F. Side AB is marked with 1 slash. That lines up with DE. Side BC has no markings, so that goes with EF. Side AC has 2 slashes on it. That goes with side DF because that also has 2 slashes. And angle A is marked, and so is angle D. Now it says, what information would be necessary to prove the following triangles congruent by side, angle, side? So I have a side here, I have an angle, now I need another side. Look at the second picture. Here's a side, here's an angle, I need this side. So the information would be that AB is congruent to ED or DE. Second one, what information would be necessary to prove the following triangles are congruent by angle, angle, side? If I look, angle, angle, side means I need 2 angles, then a side. Here's the side, here's an angle, so I need this angle. Here's a side, here's an angle, that means I need this angle here. So I would need to know that angle B is congruent to angle E. And again, that would give me angle, angle, side. The next one, what information would be necessary to prove the following triangles are congruent by angle, side, angle, which means that the side is in between the 2 angles. Here's my side. Here's 1 angle marked. I need this one. Here's the side. Here's 1 angle marked. I need this one. So it would be that angle C is congruent to angle F. Now we're going to learn how to write a formal statement, reason, proof. To do that, it's called a 2-column proof. We title the left side with statements, which is a list of things we are given or can conclude from things we are given. We write them in a numbered list. Then on the reasons, on the right column, we're going to use properties, definitions, theorems, and postulates that correspond to and support each statement. So a basic example for a statement, reason, proof. It says, given these 2 triangles, they tell me that angle 1 here is congruent to angle 2. They tell me angle A is congruent to angle E, and they tell me that AC is congruent to EC. So what I'm going to do in my statements is I'm going to write what's given. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Angle A is congruent to angle E, and side AC is congruent to side EC. And the reason is because it's given to me, so I'm going to write given. Now, what I like to do when I'm doing a proof is off to the side. If I'm given an angle or a side of the triangle, I write it next to the line. So for the first one, if we look here where it says angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, in the triangles, that's an angle. The second given piece of information, angle A and angle E are congruent. That's also an angle in my triangle. The third thing that's given to me that I marked is a side. Now, the only thing we have to do now is we have to look at how we marked the picture. If I look at the triangle on the left, I have angle, side, angle. If I look at the triangle on the right, I also have an angle, a side, and an angle. That's enough information to say that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle EDC. The reason? looking at the picture, angle side angle is congruent to angle side angle. Notice it's not always the same way it appears in the proof, but I go based off the picture. Now, proofs are never going to be that straightforward. We're going to have to use definitions and postulates to prove certain things before proving the triangles are congruent. So the first property that we're going to learn is the reflexive property, which says that a quantity is equal to itself. So I can say that AB is equal to itself by the reflexive property. I could also say that angle A is equal or congruent, technically those should be congruent, to itself by the reflexive property. So now we're going to take the second example. We have a quadrilateral PRST, so I'm going to write that in my proof. Quadrilateral PRST, that's given. I am told that PR is congruent to ST. That's also given, so I'm going to leave it in step 1. I'm going to mark my picture, PR and ST. That gave me a side of each of the triangles I'm trying to prove. I'm trying to prove, let's call this 1 and call that 2. That triangle 1 is congruent to triangle 2. I'm also given that angle PRT is congruent to triangle STR. Trace from P to R to T, that's this angle. And then S to T to R, that's this angle. That's an angle of each of my triangles. Now, step 2. If I look, I have a side and an angle. When we get stuck, we look for the reflexive property. Hopefully, you realize side RT here is part of both of my triangles. So to put that in the proof, I'm going to say RT is congruent to itself, and that is the reflexive property. Think about reflexive like a reflection. It's a mirror image. It's the same exact thing. Now that gives me a side on both of my triangles. Now, if I look at what I marked in the picture, I have enough information now to say that triangle PRT is congruent to triangle STR. And the reasoning, don't look at how it shows up on the proof. Again, we don't want to look at this. We want to look at our picture. I have a side, I have an angle, and I have a side for triangle 1. If I look at triangle 2, again, I have a side, an angle, and a side. So that tells me side, angle, side is congruent to side, angle, side. Next one. It says given AD is congruent to AC. AD is congruent to AC. That's a side, and it's given to me. I'm also told that B is the midpoint of DC. That's also given. If B is the midpoint, what do I know? We're going to define midpoint. So I can say that DB is congruent to BC. And the reason being, a midpoint cuts a segment into 2 congruent pieces. I'm going to mark the picture. That gives me a side. Now I have no more given it, and I put an X here because I defined that. I have no more given information, so I have to look at the picture. I want to prove this triangle is congruent to this triangle. So if I look, hopefully we see that both of the triangles share side AB. So the next line is going to be that AB is congruent to itself, and that's the reflexive property. And then that gives me a side. If I look at my picture and going down the left side of the proof, I have 3 sides. So that's enough to say that triangle ADB is congruent to triangle ACB. My reason, side, 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 congruent to side, side, side. Next one, it looks like the same picture. It's not the same proof because I'm given different information. So again, I want to prove triangle ADB, this triangle here, is congruent to triangle ACB, this one here. So that's number one, that's number two. So I'm going to start with the given, AD congruent to AC. That gives me a side. That's given. The next piece of given information is that BA bisects angle DAC. So maybe we want to trace or highlight DAC. If I'm bisecting that yellow angle, it means I'm cutting it in half. So that means that this angle here is going to be equal to this angle here. So for step number 2, I'm going to say angle DAB is congruent to angle CAB. Once again, for those of you that are horrendous with labeling an angle, you could put a little 1 there and a little 2 there, and you can say angle 1 is congruent to angle 2 if you don't like using the letters. And the reason they're congruent is this right here, an angle bisector cuts an angle into 2 congruent pieces. That gives me an angle. If I look at the proof, I define that. I have no more given information. So when I get stuck, I look for something that both triangles might share. Once again, in this case, both of them share side AB. So I'm going to write that AB is congruent to itself. Think mirror, reflection, reflexive property. I'm going to label that with a side. And now again, if I look at the 2 triangles that I have, and I look at what I marked, I have enough information to say that those 2 triangles are congruent by side, angle, side. And triangle 2, again, I have a side, an angle, and a side. So side, angle, side is congruent to side, angle, side. Please make sure you write down any questions and either email me or ask me next time you see me.